The most important story, I believe, of the year, if not the decade, if not the century, is the one that I'm fixing to explain to you, and I want you to listen closely, because I hear no one talking about it at all. I'm going to share my screen with you and ask you if you've heard about this, and if you have, you may not understand it. I'm going to wake you up tonight of what time it is in America. Let me share that with you, and I want you to look at this. Have you heard of this? FedNow. Now, this is a government website. FedNow is arriving in July of this year. Get on board. Get on board. Look how beautiful the website is. Man, it makes me want to just get on board. But look here at the bottom. The Federal Reserve Financial Services. I'm about to explain all that. To me, this is the most dangerous thing that's happening in America as we speak. And no one is talking about it. I mean, of course, a few of the truthers are, but none of the mainstream media. Right there, FedNow should make your toes curl. Let me explain. It's being sold as a wonderful thing because before July of 2023, if you wanted to transfer money between banks, you went through a process called ACH, the clearinghouse of the banks. The banks own ACH, okay? So if I wanted to wire you money right now, I would call the bank and I would begin an ACH. When your employers pay you with direct deposit, that's with an ACH. Now, up until July of 2023, though that's a private transaction between private banks. However, an ACH or a wire takes about 24 hours for it to clear through the clearing houses and to get in your bank account. Well, the government is now about to take over all financial transfers in this nation with FedNow. Starting July the 23rd, all financial transactions will no longer be between private banks. It will all be filtered through the federal government. Let me explain it even further. How many of you have ever heard of eBay? eBay is a middleman between me and you. I have a product to sell. You want to buy the product. However, if you're purchasing it through eBay, you don't send me the money directly. No, you send it to the middleman, eBay. eBay does what with that money? They hold it. Until what? Until the other person gets their product and they tell eBay, now you can release the money to the other guy. All right? As long as eBay holds that money, they own your money. They can decide whether to give it up or not. They own the money. Now, the federal government will become the new eBay of all financial transactions in this nation. Starting July the 23rd, when you make a financial transaction, your money... Now, how are they selling this and how are people excited? I mean, look at the website. People are excited about this. Let me show you. Look one more time. Well, I've already X'd out, sorry. But it tells you get on board. Why? There's a benefit to it. You don't have to wait on your money to go through the clearinghouse anymore. No, you'll have an instant, bam, bam. You don't have to wait overnight, 24 hours, for it to go through the private banks. You send it to FedNow, and FedNow will immediately release it to the next person. Sounds wonderful, doesn't it? You little sheeple, you. What do you mean that sounds wonderful? That now means the federal government owns your money. And if they don't like who that money's going to, if they don't like the ministry that money's going to, because that ministry won't shut their churches down, or if, I mean, come on now, this all happened while you were sleeping, ladies and gentlemen. FedNow is the most dangerous thing happening that nobody knows about. Nobody knows about it. Have you heard about it on the mainstream media? No, they did it while they thought we were sleeping. Professor Toto never sleeps. God never sleeps. So if you want to send money to who they consider an enemy, maybe it's a January the 6th protester and you've sent money to them, whoops, what happens to that money now? Folks, this is the scariest thing I have heard in a long, long time. FedNow. Deb, you're right. They can take your money. They own your money now. Your transactions are no longer private. They're no longer private. Now, I'm going to continue telling you why this story is so scary, because of another story that happened in the last few weeks that you've heard nothing about. There's another one. FedNow, keep that on your left side of your brain. Now let's go to the right side of your brain. Somebody said, what can we do to stop it? You can't, but I'll show you a way around it before we end our class tonight. All right, put FedNow on the left side. Let's go to the right side. Let's go over to a nation called Saudi Arabia and Iran. All right? What does that have to do with FedNow? A whole lot. While you were sleeping, you don't hear anybody talking about it. There's two sworn enemies. They've been enemies for generations, the Sunni and the Shiite Muslims. Saudi Arabia and Iran, sworn enemies. Did you know that now they have a peace agreement? Did anybody know that Iran and Saudi Arabia have a peace agreement in the last 2 weeks that's been signed, sealed, and delivered? But that's not the kicker. The kicker is who brokered that peace. Was it the United States of America? Who brokered that peace deal? If somebody will tell me who brokered it, I'll send you 5 stars from Professor Toto's conservative college. I'm watching. Let me look over on Rumble. Kager knew about it. China, old moonstones. You're exactly right. Lori Glenn, Joel, y'all all 5 stars from Professor Toto because you're brilliant. China did that. These are people that got their eyes on the nations. China did that. They brokered a peace deal between some of the oldest enemies in the world. Now China on the international stage is the adult in the room. But it gets worse. Now Saudi Arabia, that oil-rich nation, is planning on settling all of its oil trade with the yuan instead of the dollar. That throws the reserve status of the United States dollar into a tailspin because they're going to settle their debts with the Chinese yuan rather than the US dollar. It gets worse. Both nations, Saudi Arabia and Iran, are considering joining the BRICS National Alliance. That stands for Brazil, Russia, India, and China. Now, if you add Saudi Arabia and Iran, you have just brought together the 5 most oil-rich nations in the world, basically, and you have brought together 5 nations that are going to trade with the Chinese yuan rather than the US dollar. These are the major oil-producing companies of the world coming into alliance now. There is a table being built right before our eyes, and the United States has not been invited to sit at that table. BRICS. Now, when you take those 5 nations, let's go back over those nations again. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and possibly Iran and Saudi Arabia. Do you know what you have there? Half of the global population not using the US dollar. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what's causing this. You see that graph right there? You see what that graph is? That's the price of gold and silver soaring right now because so many people see what is coming. Gold is at an all-time high because individuals and institutions are fleeing the chaos of our times to find safety to where they can transfer money without it going through FedNow. These government policies, ladies and gentlemen, is driving that price of gold and silver through the roof. As a matter of fact, Representative Alex Mooney and Representative Andy Biggs and Paul Gozer has introduced H.R. 2435. Do you know what that is? Do you know what H.R. 2435 is? You should. It is a bill to return America to the gold standard, to facilitate the repegging of the Federal Reserve note to a fixed weight of gold bullion. If that bill were to pass, which it will not because of the Democrats, but if it were to pass, the Federal Reserve would have 24 months to disclose all of their gold holdings and their gold transactions, after which time the Federal Reserve note dollar would formally be repegged to a fixed weight of gold at the market price. Ladies and gentlemen, the Biden administration is forcing Russia and others to go towards the Chinese yuan. You know, Donald Trump said if he was president, the war in Ukraine would end today. You know why? He's a businessman. He understands they're driving Russia to the Chinese yuan. He understands what's happening. As a matter of fact, I was in New York last week. I was there to pray and believe God for Donald Trump's charges against him. I was not able to go a few weeks ago whenever he was arrested. So we went on our way here to fulfill that duty to the Republic. While I was there, I spoke to businessmen. Every one of them loved Trump. Now, not the morons on the street that don't know their head from a doobie, from some good, that's so busy smoking weed and marijuana like a bunch of imbeciles that they don't know their head. Now, them people, they don't like Trump. But every businessman I met loved Donald Trump, every one of them. Why? Because they understand Trump knows business. The gold standard must be returned to the United States of America. But now they want to raise the debt ceiling even higher. Folks, we're in trouble. And if you are not preparing, that's one thing I love about godsmoney.info, where we have created a way for you to get gold and silver with no markup. If you go and buy gold and silver anywhere else except through us, you're going to pay a markup and lose some of the value of the gold. If you become a member with us, you can get all the gold and silver you want with no markup. at all. And you take and you put your money in those precious metals, and then you can transfer money to one another through the Sound Money wallet. Matter of fact, someone just sent tithe to our ministry through that Sound Money wallet. That's not connected to FedNow, ladies and gentlemen. Ronald Reagan, one of his promises when he ran for president that he did not fulfill is that he would return America to the gold standard. If he would have done it, we wouldn't be where we are today. But instead of following through with that promise, he appointed a commission to study it. We already know what happens when you appoint a commission to do anything. It's just like a board in a church. Somebody asked me, do I have a board in my church? I said, it takes longer for a board to agree on when they're going to meet. By the time they make a decision when they're going to meet, I'll already have it all done. That's the same thing when you appoint a commission. Of course, that commission sent back a report. And who was the author of that commission? Ron Paul. That's why we don't have the gold standard today. Because these governments do not want accountability. They want to print money, spend money. And ladies and gentlemen, what I've taught you tonight, FedNow and Saudi Arabia and Iran, this to me is one of the biggest stories of the year, the decade, that our federal government is about to take over financial transactions. Are you even kidding me? Are you even for real? Yeah, that's why I joined godsmoney.info. That's why I did it. They don't know what I'm doing. Tell you one thing, ladies and gentlemen. You better do something or yell, you know what? Or just sit there and think you got all the time in the world. It's up to you. But I promise you one thing. I'm trading all my fake money for God's money, the money God created. FedNow starts July 2023. All your money will go through the federal government. Let that sink in.